Awakening by Solocitizen. Chapter 5 Magic and Steel. Present Day. At 7:35 in the morning, Lumina's alarm buzzed. She reached over to her bedside table and flicked it off. Sunlight cascaded in from the windows and filled her room with its warmth. She yawned, stretched under the covers of her bed, and then hit the intercom button.
Animus, execute Morning Protocol 1.
Every speaker in the Luna Dream, from the intercom in Lumina's room to the loudspeakers in the AI core, treated her to the best song in known space. Lumina leapt out of bed and into her shower with the water jet massage therapist system firing. She tried it once on her first day on the Luna Dream. The water jet masseuse system was almost as good as the real thing, but she never put aside the time to indulge herself until recently. Lumina even took the time to wash her mane, tail, and coat with that special shampoo she kept hoarded away. None of that she did out of some obligation to get clean, but because she was worth self-pampering. Next, she trotted down to the kitchen and sautéed some greens for breakfast. She synthesized some daffodils and vegetables, but did the actual cooking herself. The food synthesizers were having trouble with cooked items and more complicated dishes, but raw ingredients popped out fresh and edible. If she took the time to fix herself a home-cooked meal, she ate well. She sat at the countertop with a hoof draped over her belly. Breakfast left a sweet aroma in the air. Sitting there, she absorbed herself in the beauty of the moment. Not that she felt she needed an excuse to be happy there and then, but as an added bonus. The other night, she discovered that the pink mold that got into the protein goo wasn't the lethal variety. Her food supply would last her at least 2.5 years. Over the past week, Lumina studied and meditated daily, and she also started treating herself better. With some advice from Luna Dream's database, she put together a daily exercise plan. The morning after she started awakening to the magical world, Lumina figured out a way to science all the water on the ship away. She sealed herself in the atmospheric control center and depressurized the rest of the ship. All the water just boiled away, and the ship reintegrated it into the life support system as gas. That still left her with the task of repairing all the damage done, which she was planning on using as a convenient excuse to redecorate the way she wanted. A stack of paint cans waited outside her room for her to repaint her hallways every color of the rainbow. After breakfast, she scrubbed her dishes clean and left the pan hanging over the stove to dry. Lumina took out a datapad and accessed the record of an old scroll written by some pony named Star Swirl the Bearded, reviewed her lesson for the morning, and then plopped herself down in front of the east-facing window to meditate. Meditation wasn't necessary during the reign of Celestia, as attunement with the magical world was encouraged at an early age, but in the day and age in which such thinking was discouraged, just picking up the most basic skills required a lot of work. Being a grown mare without a cutie mark didn't help much either. Despite all the effort her magical studies demanded, it got a little easier every day. A week ago, clearing her head and reaching any degree of attunement took her an hour, but just the other day she accomplished the same task in 20 minutes. Catchy lyrics floated around her head, but rather than shutting them out, Lumina observed them and the other stray thoughts drifting in and out of her conscious mind. The goal was to let her mind, and the magic pulsing through her, take her places, not to control them. Sure enough, after a few minutes of work, an image of Twilight Sparkle flashed into her mind's eye. Her eyes were alive with more excitement than Lumina thought was possible. Then a door appeared, with a light and mist pouring in from the edges. The magic flowing inside her lurched, pulling her upward and inducing a sensation of floating and weightlessness. When Lumina nudged the door open, the image of a library flashed into her head. Her eyes fluttered spontaneously, but never fully opened or shut. The endless rows of bookshelves, the sky in the ceiling, the Canterlot-style walls. She recognized them all. Lumina opened her eyes and scrambled for her datapad. She went through all this before when she was just a filly and knew why she recognized the library. Lumina navigated the ship's database until she brought up a digital copy of The Elements of Harmony, a revised reference guide, and flipped to the last page. There it was, the library, just as she imagined it.
Twilight, why have I seen this before?
She flipped through the book, searching for any mention or vague reference of it.
What does this mean? I saw the library before when I was just a little filly. It was just a dream. I had it before I fell asleep looking at the last page. So what is it, Twilight? Is the library real or not?
She listened for the voice in her head, but no pony answered her. So she plopped down on the floor and closed her eyes and meditated as hard as possible.
Come on, Twilight, answer me,
she said inside her own head. Nothing but her own worried thoughts met her. Before long, she hopped out of her meditative stance and paced about the room.
Please, I need to know.
She got up and hung her head.
Why did I see the library? What is going on?
Lumina closed her eyes and plopped down on her haunches. She tried meditating again, and she committed to the task. The smell of half-filtered air tingled at her nose, and the grated floor pinched and poked at her. But, rather than succumbing to the sneeze building in her snout, or the urge to adjust her seat, Lumina meditated through it and pushed the sensations aside. For the next hour, Lumina sat with her eyes clenched shut and shouting mentally for Twilight for at least an hour without success.
I have done everything you asked,
Lumina screamed at the ceiling.
Answer me! I know you can! Why won't you talk to me?
Shouting and kicking, Lumina hurled the datapad down the hall and beat her hooves against the wall. She whimpered and collapsed on the floor. Her horn pinged against metal as she rested her sobbing face into the grating. She wanted to saw the worthless thing off. It would grow back in time, but at that moment nothing pleased her more than the thought of ridding it from her body. She jammed her horn into a hole in the grated floor and twisted her head sideways. She hissed in pain and gave in before even denting it. Lumina took a moment to prepare for the pain and then pulled, yanked, and threw her entire body weight against it. No matter how hard she tried, her horn stayed rooted to her head.
It's not real.
Lumina pulled her head out of the floor and wiped her nose and eyes.
None of it ever was real. I made it all up.
A siren screeched through the bowels of the ship. It was the proximity alarm. Her friend, the centipede, developed a routine of stalking her. Every day at 8 o'clock a.m. and 10:50 p.m., it slithered up to the ship, tested the hull with some kind of probe, and retreated back down the hole to the alien ruins. Lumina didn't care enough to do anything about it, and that machine wouldn't do anything more than prod the hull anyway, so she just stayed put and sobbed into the floor. Another alarm sounded, and that time the lighting switched to a harsh red. This was new.
Warning. Hull breach detected on Section A, Dead 4,
said Animus.
Emergency bulkheads in place. Warning. Intruder alert. Intruder alert.
Blood rushed to Lumina's head, and her heart burned with adrenaline. The centipede scared her. It was big, quick, and had a face full of metal teeth. But the worst part about it was the way it looked. How it always knew exactly where she was, and how it liked to slither up the windows and peep in on her like a voyeur. If it was on the ship, it was coming after her. Lumina charged up to her bedroom. She usually kept her stake gun on her, but she ended up leaving it under her pillow this morning.
Animus, where's the intruder?
Lumina nearly lost her footing and slid into a wall as she rounded a corner to her room.
Please restate your command,
said Animus.
Locate intruder.
Location unknown.
Lumina galloped into her room, flung the pillow off her bed and picked up the stake gun with her mouth, and slung the pouch full of stakes over her shoulders. She didn't have a saddle shooter nor a shoulder attachment to mount the weapon on, so if the thing forced Lumina to fight, the best she could do was prop the weapon against a wall or on the floor and use her front hooves to fire. The sound of needles tap-tap-tapping against metal ascended the nearby stairway. When Lumina spun to face the noise, there it was. The great black centipede reared its head from behind the bend in the corridor. It was odd seeing it like that. Not like in the pillar fortress at the heart of the ruin, or slithering across the wasteland, but at the end of a white corridor bathed in LED light. The environmental systems rumbled to life and blew warm air across its metal carapace. Plates on its head retracted, and red light swept up the corridor. It looked into Lumina's face. Her entire body tensed up and froze. Between her and the centipede was a hyperlift. Her room was a dead end. But if she got into the lift... Without turning her head away from it, her eyes forward and fixed on its red eye, she wrapped a hoof around her stake gun and reached for a stake with her mouth. Lips and teeth clamped over metal, she freed a stake from her pouch and loaded it into the magazine. She never let her eyes turn away from the centipede. All that time it held still and studied each of her movements with its eye. Lumina loaded another stake into her gun, and another, until the magazine wouldn't accept any more. The legs on the centipede flexed. She forced a stake into the firing chamber, and the gun snapped. It didn't shriek, and it didn't cry. The centipede rushed forward in near silence, only making that light tapping as it charged. That thing was at most a second behind her. She flung herself against the far wall, trying to get as far away from the centipede as possible. An acrid odor burned her snout. A meter-long spike tore through the hyperlift doors and slashed no more than a centimeter away from her pearly white coat. It retracted and plunged in again at a different angle, that time a little closer to her. Lumina stood up on her hind legs, pressed her back into the wall, and took the stake gun in her front hooves. She sighted down the barrel of the stake gun and waited for the spike to retract. The instant it did, she fired, and the gun kicked out a stake that sailed through the door and forced a shriek out from the machine on the other side. She hit a button on the control panel, which one didn't matter, just as long as it took her away from there. The hyperlift hummed away and left the centipede howling somewhere above her. Lumina took a deep breath and wiped the sweat from her brow. She needed a plan, and fast. If that thing caught up to her again, which was only a matter of time, she might not be lucky enough to have a half centimeter of steel between her and it. The hyperlift stopped at Transmat Station D13. She was near the bottom of the ship, with nowhere to run except right back up.
Quick, what would a smart pony like Twilight Sparkle do?
She asked herself.
I would use my magic to teleport to safety,
said the voice behind her mind's eye.
No, you don't get to talk to me after that.
Lumina paused long enough to stop her hooves and yell at the ceiling.
What in the name of Discord makes you think you have any right to speak to me at all after ignoring me like that? I needed you!
Neither the ceiling nor the voice replied.
That's what I thought.
Lumina clenched the stake gun between her teeth and continued on.
You're not real!
Lumina stared down the corridor ahead of her and into the transmat chamber. Her spacesuit from the expedition to the alien ruin was still crumpled up in the corner.
Actually, that isn't such a bad idea,
she said.
Especially if I make a few creative adjustments.
Dashing into the transmat chamber, Lumina launched herself over to the computer terminal and began rewriting her emergency transmat program. Lumina rushed over to her spacesuit and ripped the transponder from the fabric. Then she attached it to a stake and loaded it into her gun.
Wait, no! You can't kill it!
The little voice broke through to her, and Lumina shoved it aside.
Watch me!
Gun loaded and transmat system on standby, Lumina dove for cover behind the control station and propped up her gun. She took aim down the corridor and kept her hoof next to the hologram that read, Execute Program. Unfortunately, the centipede didn't come through the corridor. It cut its way through the ceiling. Horrible red light poured into the chamber as Lumina leapt to the side. She scrambled to the wall just as molten metal came crashing down. A wall of heat struck Lumina and burned her lungs with each of her quick breaths. From out of the molten steel and fire rose the great black centipede. It lifted its front half off the ground and assumed a striking posture. Two of its legs wrapped around the spike protruding from its side, and when they pulled the thing out, the centipede screeched and wailed. Black goo oozed from the wound, and its blender maw spat out more of the stuff. The plates on its head opened up, and the red spotlight zeroed in on Lumina.
Yeah, well, fuck you too!
Lumina fired, rolled, and kicked the hologram. Yellow light swirled around the machine, and then, with a gust of wind, it was gone. She slumped to the floor and breathed, just breathed. No danger now, the machine was dead. In a few seconds, the fire suppression system kicked on, and the chamber filled with sweet-smelling foam. The fires died, and Lumina was left sitting in the foam. She breathed easy. She killed that monster, and the Luna Dream rewarded her with a bubble bath. Not bad, all things considered.
It's not dead.
What do you mean it's not dead?
Lumina asked.
I dropped it from 2 kilometers up onto solid ice. Nothing can survive that.
It just did, and you lost a very important chance to make a friend out here.
Friend? That thing was about to eviscerate me with a death ray and rip out my entrails with a blender. You do not get to tell me I should have played nice with it. You know what? Never mind. I don't know why I'm talking to you. If I ever get off this planet alive, I'm going to find a shrink and I'm going to pop Nulamine like it's candy.
The transmat station was still receiving a signal from the transponder. Red pixels tracked it moving across the ice. She stared in disbelief and shook her head. Lumina picked herself up and reset the transmat system for another transport.
What are you doing?
What does it look like I'm doing? That thing isn't dead, so I'm going to keep dropping it until it is.
Lumina dialed up the system and put her hoof over the holographic trigger.
All my life I've been at some pony else's mercy, but not anymore. I'm not weak and helpless, and I'm going to make sure that's the last lesson that thing ever learns. Maybe you can put that in your next letter to Celestia.
I have a list of very good reasons why you shouldn't do that. Number 1, you're angry right now and not thinking straight. Number 2,
You're damn right I'm angry.
Lumina stomped her hooves and yelled at the walls.
I just found out that you, magic, and pretty much everything else I've been going through isn't real. It was a waste of time.
Lumina breathed deep, in and out, then collapsed back into the foam. She buried her face in her hooves and slipped deeper into the foam. Several minutes passed, and during that entire time she stared ahead at the wall and listened to the bubbles around her pop.
What am I doing, Twilight?
Asked Lumina.
I don't know what I'm doing or why I'm so angry. I don't know if magic is real or if I'm still crazy. I'm back to square one. Regardless of whatever's been happening to me, it's like I don't have any calluses around my heart anymore. And all this anger in me is bubbling up to the surface, and I don't know where it's coming from. I'm more unstable now than ever before.
Lumina curled up on herself.
I thought I was changing, but just look at me now. It's like any headway I made has to be done by taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I'm just frustrated with it all.
You're using your heart and your horn much more than before. You'll never get those calluses back, so you'll have to be more forgiving and patient with yourself. No pony is asking you to change overnight. As for the anger, why don't you just let it all out? You know, like you did with so much of your other baggage.
I want to, but I don't know if I can.
She never finished that sentence.
Why am I even talking to you? You're about as real as the library.
What about all you've learned about trusting yourself? Is that what your gut is telling you now? That nothing you've experienced is real?
With a muffled bang, a steel beam from the floor above her slipped down into the foam. Lumina got back on her hooves, shook the foam from her mane, and dragged herself out of the transmat station carrying the stake gun in her mouth.
Spare me the lecture, Twilight. I have a ship to inspect,
she said with the gun between her teeth.
I need to make sure Blenderface didn't cut through anything important.
Over the course of the morning, Lumina tracked the centipede's trail down corridors, up staircases, and through circular holes in the walls. It wasn't on board the Luna Dream for more than 10 minutes, but the damage it caused was extensive. At one point, it cut a path through one of the sick bays, out into the corridor on the other side, past the movie theater, and straight into the hyperlift tube in the wall. She didn't even know the ship had a movie theater until the monster blew a hole in it. If Lumina stood in just the right place, she could gaze halfway across the deck. By dumb luck, the centipede stayed away from the FTL drive and life support systems. In fact, its trail led around the FTL drive. It got close, but veered around instead of boring through. She stared up at the hole in her deck with a flashlight in her mouth and aimed up at the deck above, scratching her head.
Now, why would it do that?
She asked herself.
Animus, run diagnostics on FTL drive and all primary systems on deck.
Lumina shined her flashlight on the writing on the floor above her.
27 through 32.
Diagnosis complete,
said Animus.
All systems within standard operating parameters.
Lumina spat out her flashlight and sat down on the floor. Something bothered her about this situation, and it wasn't the holes in the ship. No, something else put her at dis-ease. Then Lumina thought about the centipede's entrance, how she responded, and how her AI companion locked down the hull breach. Animus saved the ship without acting derpy or even asking Lumina to hold his virtual hoof.
Animus, how are you feeling today?
Lumina asked.
Please restate your command.
Lumina face-huffed.
Run self-diagnosis,
She said.
and a full analysis of your CPU usage. I'd like to know what you're using all your processing power on.
A camera at the far end of the corridor aimed itself at Lumina, and a little red light flicked on,
Diagnosis complete.
said Animus's voice.
Systems not within operating parameters. CPU usage at 57%.
Okay, wow.
Lumina stood up and glanced around for the nearest hyperlift.
I'm going to the AI core and take a look at you myself. In the meantime, just go into sleep mode, okay?
Every flavor of AI experienced critical system failure at around 50% CPU usage. Lumina wasn't an expert on computer science, but the company's technicians warned her about the damage a crash would do to an AI. At any moment, Animus might crash, and any vestige of her friend would die. Lumina hurried to the nearest hyperlift and rode it up to the break in the tube, then continued on hoof through the darkness. Once at the AI core, she climbed down to Animus's processor, carrying her crowbar in her mouth. Lumina placed her hoof on the panel next to the hard drives to unlock the holographic command console and coerced it from the wall with the crowbar. Arcane files and high-level command language barraged the holographic screen. Lumina didn't know what she was doing. That was all gibberish to her, but with each passing second she risked losing him permanently, and for that reason alone she ventured into one of his programs. Up popped an image of a white unicorn with a disheveled mane and a smile that only a happy reader could wear. She sat with her legs tucked under her on a couch with a virtual book hovering next to her face.
Well, that's me.
Lumina looked down at the timestamp. It was dated 4th of planting season, 10,056, one day before Luna Dream crashed.
Animus, have you been thinking about my outburst at you?
The recording zoomed in on Lumina's face, superimposed a grid over her, and then panned over to her tail. The icon of a pony with a happy face popped at the bottom right. Additional programs were gathering, analyzing, and running data on everything from body language to vital signs.
Lumina, may I ask you a question?
A recording of Animus's voice played.
Go ahead.
The recording of Lumina turned the page of her virtual book. Lumina watched the scene play out, right up until she snapped at Animus, and the icon at the bottom switched to an angry face. She backed out of the recording before the rest of the scene unfolded. She brushed her mane behind her eyes and brought up one of the programs running an analysis of the recording. A holographic window opened, and there she found the same recording of her snapping at Animus, only this time a recording from the day Lumina met Animus ran side by side. The hologram showed a black and white image of her lounging on her stomach and staring at the ceiling. This program was comparing the two and searching for similarities. By now, most subjects develop resentment towards the AI, but not her, said an off-screen voice. They actually get along. They have synergy. We need to put Lumina and Animus on a ship together. Lumina backed out and snooped in on other programs. By the looks of it, this one was comparing body temperature readings from the recordings of her outburst to her heat data collected from another memory. The video was nothing more than a series of flashing numbers, but the audio played clear.
What about me?
Animus' voice asked.
I am a part of the ship. I am unable to quit.
It was just a thought,
said Lumina.
I'm not leaving you behind, not now and not ever. You're one of the few friends I have left. I'm not losing you.
That file wasn't very old at all. It was from their last assignment. Lumina exited the program and found 100 more running similar comparisons on her outburst to other memories. Problem was that this crappy backup CPU couldn't handle it all. If the problem was about navigation or even simple engineering, she would find a way to sort it out. But the problem at Hoof felt far outside her element.
I know a way you can save him.
Twilight's voice intruded on Lumina's thoughts.
I know you might not want to hear it right now, but magic can help you.
You're not real, Twilight, and neither is magic.
Lumina deactivated the holographic console and pulled herself up to the floor above. As she climbed up, Lumina caught a whiff of herself. All that dried foam in her coat smelled like antifreeze.
I need real solutions.
If magic isn't real, then why do you keep inviting it in?
The voice was accompanied by a tingling in Lumina's horn.
Have you given what I suggested earlier any more thought?
I really don't have time for this,
said Lumina.
Please just, I don't know, leave me alone so I can figure out how to fix Animus. I can't deal with you right now.
There's some pony here who wants to speak with you, and she knows a way to save your friend,
Twilight said.
Why not just hear what she has to say? The worst thing that could possibly happen is it doesn't work and you waste a little bit of time. Last time I checked, you had plenty of that.
Lumina stopped, closed her eyes, and focused.
Why didn't you tell me about this sooner? Either you're just part of my imagination and I'm making it all up as I go along, or you are real and you knew this entire time and didn't tell me. Either way, I have no reason to talk with you right now.
We are aware of him as we are aware of you. You've been going through a lot of changes, and I didn't tell you about him because in order to save him, you're going to need to come here first. We weren't sure if you were ready for this until now.
My father was right. You're not my friend.
She spat out the words.
Leave me alone.
You want to know if magic is real, and if the changes you've been experiencing are real? Then ask yourself the only question that matters. Do you feel different?
Real or not, magic has impacted my life. I won't deny that.
Lumina paced up and down the AI core and spoke at the ceiling.
Now, do you still trust yourself? What is your gut telling you now?
Part of Lumina yearned to kick the wall behind her, or break something delicate, but instead she counted to 3 and regrouped. Lumina circled around the AI core, sat down, and adopted her mother's meditating position. The whole thing was a waste of her time. She closed her eyes and cleared her head, including that last thought. No more than a few minutes into her trance, and magic started flowing in. It swirled around inside her before jolting sideways. Then it corrected its path and shot up her head and out of her body. Lumina buzzed with energy.
This part is a little tricky. All you have to do is trust your instincts and follow the current.
Sounds easy.
I haven't gotten to the hard part yet. You're going to have to let go of everything. Your body, your desires, and your anger. You'll have to let go of all of them.
Lumina let her mind move in the direction of the magic, and soon after she started floating up and up. When she opened her eyes again, she was still on the ground, and the sensations vanished. She closed her eyes again and let herself experience floating. Intense vibrations joined with the floating, and in seconds every part of Lumina trembled at a new frequency. Her mind, or rather her essence, started extruding out of her head and through her horn. Then the magic came pounding on a locked door in Lumina's heart.
I'm scared,
she thought.
What's happening to me?
The current stopped, and Lumina was left hanging halfway outside her own body. She couldn't see anything except for the red inside of her eyes, but the smell of grass and the sound of chattering ponies filled the inside of her head.
Don't be scared,
said one voice out of many.
This is the hardest part. Everything you've accomplished on your journey here is at stake. You'll have to trust yourself. Let go of all that anger you're still clinging. Let go. Trust yourself and make the leap, or this is as far as you'll go.
I think I can do that, Twilight. I think I can, but what if I can't?
Then you're not ready, and we'll try again when you are.
Magic battered against her core, and the pressure against Lumina's heart surged stronger and stronger.
I'm ready. I'll let go. I can do it, Twilight.
With that, Lumina shrugged free of the resistance inside her and drifted up and out of everything. 18th of harvest season, 10,051 AC. 4th day of the running of the leaves. The last day Lumina saw her mother was the day the Pegasus tribe set fire to the sky. Lumina and her father had just stepped off the tram at the Arion City spaceport when trails of fire arced through the sky. On any other day they might have fooled her for shooting stars over the city, but that day she knew better. They were ships falling from orbit. She carried her suitcase in her mouth and followed her father.
Dad?
Lumina stopped for a second to take in the sight above, and the crowd of anxious ponies behind her pushed past. She set her suitcase down to talk properly.
Are those Pegasus Empire dropships?
Her father stepped around behind her and pushed her until she got moving again. No, he said above the roar of the crowd. That's our defense fleet burning up in the atmosphere. They didn't stand a chance. Come on, the invasion force won't be far behind. They continued until they reached the spaceport gate. Lumina stopped and scanned the crowd for a familiar face. Her father didn't like that and prodded her along with his horn to get her moving again. "She's not here," her father said. "I'd give the Pegasi 30 minutes before they make planetfall. We have to find a shuttle and get out of here, now!"
"She said she'd be here."
Lumina shifted on her hooves.
"We can spare a minute, then we'll go."
From out of that crowd of strangers and refugees emerged a pink unicorn with a smile as wide as her heart. She waved at Lumina, pushed her way through the crowd, and when she finally reached her daughter, threw her hooves around her.
"Mom, we were so worried you weren't going to make it,"
Lumina said.
"And let you two go off on some big adventure without me?"
Her mother pulled herself away and put a hoof on her shoulder.
"Never."
Lumina's father cleared his throat.
"It's good to see you again, Lightning Spectre,"
said Lumina's mother, and she meant it.
"And you as well," he said. "Wherever we end up, we're going to get there together."
Inside the spaceport, hordes of Earth ponies, zebras, unicorns, and Pegasi huddled in tents and around shuttlecrafts. The spaceport itself was nothing more than a gray tarmac with shuttles parked in little concrete craters. A lucky few gathered around the shuttles waiting to depart, while others pushed and yelled against fences trying to break through to the ships. A handful of the Arion Defense Force was all that kept the crowd from devolving into a mob. The harsh scent of bodily waste and sweat stained the air. One at a time, Lumina and her family approached the shuttles, and one after the other they were turned away. "Last shuttle up to FTL ship," every pilot told them, "and we don't have room for any more."
"We'll have to flee the country," said Lumina's father at one point. "If we can't find transport off-world, we'll have to run and hide."
They had given up hope of finding transport off-world when they stumbled upon a shuttle unlike any of the others. It wasn't of Earth pony, Pegasi, or unicorn design, but a combination of all three. No pony would call it a hybrid, that was too generous a term. Patchwork, and derelict fit it much better. Someone creative put together a shuttle out of an Earth pony hull, Pegasi engines, and an oversized dark matter reactor model that was banned on most worlds. Lumina and her family stopped near the edge of a crowd gathering around the ship. The shuttle belonged to a griffin, with enough presence to stop every conversation at a party as he strolled in. His gestures were as grand and sweeping as his personality. The griffin wore a denim Interstellar Express flight jacket. He sauntered out in front of the shuttle, like a sales pony about to peddle his wares, and put a claw in his beak and whistled.
"Fillies and gentilcos, please settle down."
Quiet rolled through the crowd, and the griffin continued.
"We all know what's going on in the skies over our head, so I'll be quick. The Pegasi are closing in, and according to Interstellar Express policy, we have about 40 minutes before all FTL ships break orbit. They aren't going to send down any more shuttles. There's only one boat with shuttles still planetside, and that's mine, the great and powerful IEC Ursa Minor."
The ponies gathered around the shuttle kicked and fought to break down the fence between them and the griffin.
"Wow, hold your horses!"
He whistled again, and the crowd backed down.
"I can't have a bunch of trigger-happy ponies all over my ship. There just isn't enough room, and frankly it's a little too stressful for my AI companion and me to deal with. So, if any of you think of trying to overrun my little shuttlecraft, I'll take off and leave you all sucking my engine fumes."
At that, the griffin started pointing at ponies near the front.
You're in,"
he said to each. As he picked them, the ponies organized themselves near the gate, and one at a time the soldiers ushered them through.
"We're not going to get on that ship," said Lumina's father. "He's only taking those near the fences. If we want to get off-world, we'll need to get close enough for him to see our faces."
Lumina's father pushed and shoved his way through the crowd. She followed, and her mother stayed less than a tail length behind her. They cut through an Earth pony family, 2 parents and 3 foals just old enough to walk. When they reached the fence, Lumina's father threw himself against the metal and thrashed his hooves until the chain links rattled.
"Hey, over here!"
Lumina's father banged against the fence as the griffin walked by, but he waved him off without even looking in his direction.
"Can you take 3 more? We need to get off-world, anywhere but here." "You and everybody and their grandmother," said the griffin. "I don't have the spare weight for any more. Sorry, I can't take you."
Lumina and her mother joined her father at the fence. The griffin stood up on his box, whistled, and addressed the crowd one last time. "Listen up," he said. "My AI friend overestimated how many I could fit aboard my tiny craft. I told her to run the numbers twice, but what can I say? If machines could really think, where would we be? I'm out of room, so scram. And don't even think of trying to swarm over the fence, or I'll turn on the engines they explicitly told me not to engage in atmosphere. The Pegasi will secure the spaceport first thing, so if you leave now, you stand a good chance of missing their mobile infantry and their fancy-powered armor. Believe me, they do not play nice, and they will use excessive force." The Griffin stepped down from his box, and the crowd devolved into screaming and pleading. The father of the Earth Pony family shouted obscenities at him with a raised hoof. The Griffin adjusted his jacket and slicked back the plumage atop his head. "Please, I'm a scientist!" Lumina's father rattled the chain-link fence as the Griffin retreated towards his shuttle. "If the Pegasi capture me, they will force engineering secrets out of me any way they can. I dare not imagine the things they will do to my family in order to get to me. You have to help us!" Nothing her father said changed the Griffin's mind. He just walked on by. He gave Lumina's father no more than a sideways glance as he popped open the shuttle's cockpit. But then he spotted Lumina. Their eyes made contact briefly, and the color drained from his face. The Griffin broke away and shook himself out. I think I'm going to regret this," the Griffin said. "All right, fine. I think I can make room for 2 more. Yeah, 2 more, but that's it. Any more, we're too heavy to break atmosphere."
"But there are 3 of us," said Lumina.
"I'm sorry, but I'm pushing it at 2. The Griffin curled his tail around and fiddled with it. "Sorry, I really am. I know she's really pretty to look at, but my shuttle is a hunk of trash. She can't handle much weight." Lumina's mother pulled her away from the fence, put her hooves on her shoulders, and made her look her right in the eye.
"Listen to me. I can't come with you," her mother said. "What?"
Lumina's eyes widened and she shook her head.
"But you have to. We're not leaving you behind. We'll find another way."
"I'm not letting my only daughter stay behind for what happens next."
Her mother broke into tears and her voice trembled.
"You heard your father. We can't let him get captured. You have to go on without me."
"We'll leave our luggage behind," said Lumina's father. "We'll get the pilot to lighten up his ship. I can find a way to get you on board. Watch me. You're coming with us."
"We both know what's in those saddlebags of yours, Lightning."
Lumina's mother put her front hooves back on the ground and addressed the father of her daughter.
"We can't let them get their hooves on you, or what you're carrying in there. You have to go. I'll be fine."
Lumina buried her face in her mother's mane. She fought back tears, and they never came. Part of her didn't believe what was happening, while another part resorted to walling off the emotion. The mare reached a hoof around her daughter and held her close.
"I'm going to see you again. I don't care how long it takes," said Lumina. "I'll come back for you."
"I love you more than anything else."
Her mother backed away.
"But I don't want my one and only daughter obsessing over something she doesn't have any control over. Make a life for yourself out there. Now go. You have to get out of here while you still can."
In a hyper-real daze, Lumina's father dragged her away from her mother by the tail. Fireballs cut through the cloud cover and descended towards the city. That wasn't a breeze. The angle and speed was completely different. Her father nudged her toward the gate, and the guards let them through. The Griffin ushered her inside the shuttle, but her father stopped to say something to her mother. She never heard what he said. She never asked. Her mother let out a little laugh and waved him off with tears in her eyes. Not a minute after Lumina's father stepped on board, the engines fired and the craft peeled away into the sky, roaring. Her mother shrank and shrank on the receding tarmac. She kept her eyes on the window until her mother vanished in the concrete. Then she fell to the floor and sniffled. The inside of the shuttlecraft smelled like somebody threw up in the corner, but she didn't care about anything around her. Lumina's father put a hoof on her shoulders to comfort her, but she shrugged it off. After a few minutes, the roar of the engines faded into silence, and when Lumina looked out the window again, all she saw was darkness and a plain of white and blue stretching out below her. They said the sky was full of ships, but Lumina didn't even see the FTL ship as the shuttle pulled up alongside it and docked. A hatch at the far end of the shuttle hissed open to let the crowd of refugees and their Griffin pilots step through to the ship. Any other hour of the day, the very idea of trotting onto a gleaming white interstellar spaceship would have filled Lumina with awe. After today, she kept her eyes focused on the floor and just followed the crowd to the cargo hold, their new home for the next few weeks. Over 2,000 ponies shared 5 cargo holds, each roughly the size of the gymnasium at Lumina's school. 10,000 more filled the ships clinging to the Ursa Minor's hull, but Lumina never heard nor saw any of them. Ponies from every social class and every tribe were huddled around cots spread throughout the chamber. There was a single food synthesizer tucked into a corner to serve every pony there, and the ponies occupying the hold next to them. A few of the larger families claimed the empty cargo containers in the corner and converted them into temporary houses. Every pony else lived in tents or on cots out in the open. Neither Lumina nor her father thought to pack a tent, so they claimed 2 cots beside each other in the open. At least no pony had peed or puked in it yet, but with a couple hundred ponies sharing such a small space, it wouldn't be long before it reeked. Near their territory, a blue unicorn with a worried expression unfitting of her bright blue coat and cyan mane questioned an earth pony couple. She had strapped a signboard to her with a picture of a grinning earth pony standing in front of the fountains of Arion. The caption beneath it read, "Have you seen this stallion?"
He said he'd be here on the last shuttle up, she said. He has to be here.
Lumina watched the unicorn until she gave up and trotted over to a group of zebras to try again. For a long time, neither Lumina nor her father spoke, and after a while she tried meditating, but her mind was too restless and distressed to focus. Her mind wandered to her mother, and then to the pilot. What did he see in Lumina that had caused him to reconsider? She withdrew the book from her suitcase, laid down on her cot, and started reading the story of the mysterious mare duel. "I can't believe you brought that." Her father pointed at her open book.
"It's here now, and I'm not getting rid of it."
Lumina lifted a hoof out from under her and turned the page. "No, I wasn't going to. Never mind. Would you mind if I take a look too?" Lumina nodded, and her father trotted over to her cot and peeked over her shoulder. Regal and slender illustrations accompanied each page of text. The artist took great care in capturing the elegance and style used to craft the Canterlot stained glass works of old. On the page, a unicorn in a purple costume levitated rocks and concrete into the air, and commanded them to take on new shapes and reconstruct a broken dam. "I have a question," said Lumina's father. "How is it that one unicorn can lift all that into the air, and cast a completely different spell to rebuild that thing at the same time? That sounds impossibly difficult, even for a unicorn mage."
"According to the mythology, the size and weight of the object doesn't really matter."
Lumina turned the page.
"Their magical strength depends on their connection to the magical world, their knowledge, and their own belief in themselves. In other words, with enough understanding and conviction, a unicorn can move a mountain just as easily as a pebble. At least in the stories."
Huh. Sounds far-fetched even for fantasy.
"Well, it's just that, a fantasy. None of it ever happened. The rules of magic can be whatever the author wants."
Still sounds absurd to me. Lumina's father pointed at a picture of the mysterious mare duel. What's stopping her from robbing a bank or burning the town down?
"I think you're missing the point."
Lumina pushed the cover closed with her horn and climbed out of her cot.
"It doesn't work like that. Ponies with a strong magical connection are enlightened, so they are above that kind of thing. Here, take a look if you want."
Lumina shoved the book into her father's hooves.
"I'm done here for right now."
Lumina didn't say more. She cantered toward the door, and her father didn't stop her. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of her father just as she stepped out of the cargo bay. She wasn't sure, but it looked like he was reading her book. More refugees congregated in the corridors, but as she put some distance between her and the cargo bays, the crowds thinned until she was alone with the white walls and low hum of the starship. Lumina crossed the threshold into an empty room lit from every angle by LEDs. An alarm flared. Yellow light replaced the white. Lumina covered her ears to save them from the siren.
"I'm sorry. Whatever I did, I didn't mean to do it."
Lumina lied down on her stomach, buried her face in the floor, and pressed her hooves into her ears.
"Please, just let me go. I need to get back to my father."
The siren died, and the lights returned to their sterile white.
"You are not Gerard,"
said a female voice. From where exactly the voice was coming from, Lumina didn't know. She peeked over her shoulder, but found no pony. The voice didn't sound like it belonged to any equine either. It was too synthetic.
"No, my name's Lumina."
She got back on her hooves.
Who am I talking to exactly?
I am Gilda.
the voice said.
I am the ship. You are trespassing inside me. Why have you strayed outside the designated refugee area?
I don't know. I was just wandering around a bit. I wanted to find your pilot. You know, the griffin in the flight jacket?
His name is Gerard, and he is currently engaged in activities considered illegal on 70 worlds and frowned upon by our employer. He does not wish to be disturbed.
Well, then, in that case, I'll just be going,
said Lumina.
I'll turn around and head back to the cargo hold, and we can forget this happened.
I never said you were not permitted to see him.
The inflection in Gilda's voice never changed, not even a little, and that creeped Lumina out.
On the contrary, I believe now is the best time for you to visit Gerard. Take the hyperlift at the end of this room to the bridge.
A set of doors opened further down the room,
I really think I should get back,
said Lumina.
My dad is probably really worried about where I ran off to by now, but maybe some other time?
I have sealed the doors behind you.
All right. I'll go say hi to your pilot then. That sounds like the best thing to do.
Lumina boarded the hyperlift, but before she even approached the control console, the doors clamped down behind her and the capsule took off. She rode on a low vibration to a long hallway lit by orange holograms. Something was burning up there. It smelled like a cross between a skunk and the health food store next to her mother's house. A figure kicked back in a command chair with his back to the door as he breathed out smoke and flipped through the pages of his paperback book without even glancing at the starfield outside his window. Music sang out of the speakers all around the bridge. The figure's tail danced to the beat.
Gerard, you have a visitor,
said Gilda. The head of an eagle poked out from behind the command chair, then popped back out of sight.
Crap.
The figure shuffled around behind his chair and mashed holographic symbols together.
Hold on, I'll be right there.
The music cut out and air vents around the bridge sucked the smoke out of the room and replaced it with clean, breathable air. The figure raised an eyedropper above his head and squeezed until it produced a couple of drops. The chair spun around, and there sat the griffin that saved Lumina and her father. His eyes were much redder than she remembered.
Hey, what's good?
He smiled through his beak.
The ship's AI put you up to this, didn't she? Sort of. I didn't really have much choice. I wanted to say thank you. You took a risk bringing my dad and me on your shuttle, but you brought us along anyway, and, well, thank you. If you didn't take that risk, I don't know where I'd be right now.
The griffin's eyes widened, and the plumage on his head stood up.
You're that unicorn from before,
he said.
Yes, I remember you. No problem. I have to apologize for my good-for-nothing AI. We passed the time by playing pranks on each other.
The griffin leaned forward in his chair, glanced left and right, and covered one side of his beak while only half whispering to Lumina. She wasn't socialized very well. None of the other computers liked to play with her at recess. I think she also rode the short bus to school, if you know what I mean.
Anyway, I'm just glad we got off Arion in time.
Gerard scooted back in his chair.
And it looks like we're going to have enough speed to make our first FTL jump to New Canterlot before the Pegasus blockade sets up. The Pegasus Empire is damn ruthless, and I can say that from first-claw experience.
New Canterlot?
Lumina stepped forward and glanced at the holograms.
Is that where we're headed?
You don't know that? You boarded a superluminal starship without even checking the destination first? That's messed up.
We didn't even pay for our tickets. Your shuttle was the last off-world, so we didn't think to ask.
Gerard aimed his command chair at the console and started dragging and rotating symbols in the air. At his touch, the holograms turned green, and a strong bass pumped through the bridge.
Yeah, New Canterlot, the glorious stronghold of the unicorn tribe,
he said.
I bet you'll like it. A pretty unicorn like you will fit right in. You said your father is a scientist or engineer, right? The corporations will love him. You two will do fine.
You've been there before?
Lumina nodded her horn in Gerard's direction. He glanced at her, over his shoulder, out at space, then back at her.
Where? Arion?
Gerard pointed at the starfield beyond his window.
Nope, can't say that I have, excluding the spaceport, of course.
No, I mean New Canterlot.
Lumina shook her head.
Have you ever been there before?
Yeah, a whole bunch of times. Every major corporation this side of the Pegasus Empire and their mothers is based there, including yours truly's employer. They say a unicorn monarch leads the planet, but that's Minotaur crap. The corporations run everything. Hell, the vending machines on New Canterlot take corporate shares.
Is it beautiful?
Lumina asked. The griffin scratched his lower beak. That depends entirely on if you like trees or stalactites. New Canterlot isn't technically a habitable world. It's the second rock in a binary system. It was settled by unicorns looking for precious gems and metals. They carved out these massive underground quarries and built their cities into mined-out sections. You're going to walk on streets of gold, and your daddy the engineer will probably find a nice stalactite overhanging Celestial City to live in. You're never going to see the sky again, not unless you get a ride off-world. And next time, they will make you pay a small fortune for the privilege. No sky. Lumina left her world behind, but she assumed wherever she ended up, she would have a moon and a sky. She tucked her ears down and wrapped her tail around her legs.
I didn't know I was leaving the sky behind,
she whispered. Gerard sighed and brushed ash off his jacket. When I was younger than you, the Pegasus tribe invaded my world, forcing me, my parents, and about 4 million other griffins to flee to the stars. Gerard's eyes lost themselves in a spinning hologram to his left, but after a moment he locked them on Lumina. We ended up colonizing a rock just outside of the Sirius system. I thought I'd never see the sky again. There was no way I could afford to get a ship to ferry me away from there, but I was like, I'm not going to spend my entire life pulling heavy metals out of caves. So, I started looking for a way out.
What did you do?
Lumina's ears perked up a little. I became a pilot for the Interstellar Express first chance I got, and never looked back. Gerard leaned back in his command chair. If you want to see the stars over Arion again, the Interstellar Express can make it happen. For the first time in what felt like ages, Lumina's eyes lit up, and her lips turned up in a slight smile.
I wanted to ask you something, Gerard,
Lumina said. Shoot.
Why did you change your mind and decide to take my father and me?
Oh boy, I'm not sure how to answer that one. He scratched his head and thought for a moment. It's like this. You know how Pony Society props science and everything left-brained up on a pedestal? Us Griffins didn't. We believed everything living was magical. I was taught to always listen to my gut and to use my instincts.
Sounds really cool,
said Lumina. Gerard's eyes narrowed. If medicine that doesn't work, a dirt poor economy, and almost no army to defend the planet when the Pegasus Empire attacks sounds cool, I guess it was pretty cool. I know this must sound like superstitious Minotaur crap, said Gerard, but when I saw you, I got this feeling like I was doing something wrong. It was like you were supposed to be on that shuttle, like staying on Arion wasn't in your horoscope and it was my job to get you out of there. In a way, I was greedy. Because if I hadn't taken you along, I knew I'd pay the price in bad karma for the rest of my life. Lumina pinched her eyebrows together. She didn't really know what to think of that, except to ask more questions.
How am I more important than any of those ponies that got left behind?
I don't know. Gerard threw his claws up. Maybe you're supposed to do something really great, like build a bridge or bring peace back to the galaxy. Maybe you're an element of harmony, if you believe in that kind of thing. Or maybe I have it all wrong, and I just owed you some good karma, and this was my way of paying my debt. I don't know. All I know is that whatever you're supposed to do, you wouldn't accomplish it on Arion.